Visit parthakachana.com for technology resources and stock analysis. 50 intermediate-level design patterns interview questions with corresponding answers. 1. What are the main advantages of using design patterns in software development? Answer. Design patterns provide standardized solutions to common software design problems, improving code reusability, scalability, and maintainability. They also enhance communication among developers, as patterns provide a shared vocabulary. This results in a more efficient and organized development process. 2. Can you explain the Singleton pattern and provide an example of where it might be used? Answer. The Singleton pattern ensures that a class has only one instance and provides a global point of access to that instance. It's often used for resource-heavy objects like database connections, logging, or configuration management, where multiple instances could lead to inefficiency or inconsistency. 3. In what scenario would you use the factory method pattern? Answer. The factory method pattern is used when you want to delegate the creation of objects to subclasses while keeping the client code unaware of the actual object creation process. It is useful when you have multiple object types and the decision of which one to create depends on dynamic conditions or user input. 4. What's the difference between the prototype pattern and the factory method pattern? Answer. The prototype pattern clones existing instances to create new objects, avoiding the overhead of creating complex objects from scratch. On the other hand, the factory method creates new instances based on the class type. Prototype is used when object creation is expensive and you want to copy properties, whereas factory method is more flexible in determining the object's creation process. 5. How would you implement the observer pattern in a system where several components need to react to changes in a subject state? Answer. In the observer pattern, the subject maintains a list of observers that need to be notified of any state changes. Whenever the state changes, the subject calls the notify method, and all observers get updated. For example, this can be used in a GUI application where UI elements need to update when underlying data changes. 6. What is the purpose of the decorator pattern, and can you give an example of its usage? Answer. The decorator pattern allows you to add behavior to individual objects without modifying their class. It's useful when you need to extend functionality dynamically. For instance, in a text editor, you could use the decorator pattern to add features like bold, italics, and underline to the text without changing the text object's class. 7. When would you prefer the strategy pattern over the state pattern? Answer. The strategy pattern is used when you have multiple algorithms for a specific task and you want to switch between them dynamically based on the context. The state pattern, however, focuses on changing the behavior of an object based on its internal state. Use strategy when the logic is interchangeable and state when the object's behavior should change based on internal conditions. 8. Can you describe a scenario where the chain of responsibility pattern would be useful? Answer. The chain of responsibility pattern is useful when you need to pass a request through a chain of handlers, where each handler decides whether to process the request or pass it along. A practical scenario would be in a customer support system where requests are passed from basic to advanced support depending on the issue's complexity. 9. How does the command pattern improve the flexibility of a system? Answer. The command pattern encapsulates a request as an object, allowing you to parameterize methods with different requests, queue them, and support undoable operations. It decouples the invoker from the object that performs the action, which is useful in applications like text editors where you need to support undo/redo functionality. 10. Explain how the adapter pattern can be applied in real-world systems. Answer. The adapter pattern allows incompatible interfaces to work together by wrapping one class in another that provides the expected interface. For example, if you have a legacy payment system that doesn't match the interface of a new API, you can create an adapter that translates requests between the new system and the old one. 11. In which scenarios would you prefer using the builder pattern? Answer. The builder pattern is ideal when constructing complex objects step by step, especially when these objects require several optional parameters or when the construction process can vary. A real-world example could be building a complex document like a report, where sections, headers, and footers may or may not be included. 12. How does the template method pattern facilitate code reuse? Answer. The template method pattern defines the skeleton of an algorithm and a method, deferring specific steps to subclasses. This allows the common algorithm to be reused, while subclasses provide their specific implementations for certain steps. It's commonly used when several classes share the same general algorithm structure, but differ in certain details. 13. How would you apply the mediator pattern to reduce coupling in a system? Answer. The mediator pattern centralizes communication between objects by using a mediator object to manage their interactions. Instead of objects communicating directly with each other, leading to tight coupling, they send messages to the mediator, which handles the logic. This is useful in UI design, where buttons, text boxes, and labels can all communicate through a single mediator. 14. What problem does the flyweight pattern solve, and when would you use it? Answer. The flyweight pattern reduces memory usage by sharing as much data as possible between similar objects. It's useful in situations where there are many small objects that share common data, such as characters in a text editor where only unique characters are stored, while others reference these. 15. Can you explain the bridge pattern and when to use it? Answer. The bridge pattern separates an object's abstraction from its implementation, so they can be changed independently. It's useful when a system might have multiple variants of both the abstraction and implementation, such as having different types of displays, e.g., a 3D renderer and a 2D renderer that can be used with different operating systems. 16. What are some advantages of the composite pattern, and when would you apply it? Answer. The composite pattern allows you to treat individual objects and compositions of objects uniformly. It's useful when building hierarchical structures like file systems or UI components, e.g., buttons, panels, and windows, where you want to perform operations on both individual objects and groups of them in the same way. 17. How does the memento pattern help with undo functionality in an application? Answer. The memento pattern saves an object state so it can be restored later without violating encapsulation. It's useful for implementing undo functionality, where you need to revert an object back to its previous state. For example, in a text editor, mementos could save the document state before each change, enabling the user to undo actions. 18. Explain the difference between the abstract factory and factory method patterns. Answer. The abstract factory pattern provides an interface to create families of related or dependent objects without specifying their concrete classes. The factory method pattern, on the other hand, delegates the creation of a single object to subclasses. Abstract factory is useful when you need to create multiple related objects, while factory method focuses on creating a single object. 19. How can you implement the proxy pattern for remote objects? Answer. The proxy pattern acts as a surrogate for another object, controlling access to it. In the case of remote objects, a proxy can handle communication with the actual object over a network, ensuring that the client doesn't need to know about the complexities of network communication. This can be seen in systems like Remote Method Invocation (RMI). 20. When would you use the state pattern to manage an object's behavior? Answer. The state pattern allows an object to change its behavior when its internal state changes. It's useful when an object has multiple states and each state requires different behavior. A typical example is a media player that changes its behavior depending on whether it's in a playing, paused, or stopped state. 21. How does the visitor pattern separate concerns between algorithms and object structures? Answer. The visitor pattern allows you to define a new operation without changing the class of the elements on which it operates. It's useful when you have a complex object structure and want to perform operations that vary across different elements, such as calculating taxes for different product types in an e-commerce system. 22. How would you refactor a class with multiple if-else statements that depend on different states? Answer. You can refactor the class using the state pattern, where each state is represented by a class and the context object delegates state-specific behavior to these state objects. This makes the code more maintainable by avoiding a large, monolithic method full of conditional logic. 23. What are some potential drawbacks of using the Singleton pattern? Answer. While Singleton ensures a single instance, It can lead to problems like global state, making it difficult to manage dependencies and causing issues with unit testing. Singletons can also introduce tight coupling and hinder extensibility, making future modifications harder. 24. How does the chain of responsibility pattern promote flexibility in handling requests? Answer. The chain of responsibility pattern allows a request to be passed along a chain of handlers, where each handler decides whether to process it or pass it to the next one. This promotes flexibility by decoupling the sender of a request from the receivers, allowing the handling process to change dynamically at runtime. 25. Can you explain the role of the flyweight pattern in improving performance? Answer. The flyweight pattern optimizes performance by sharing common data between objects, reducing memory overhead. It's useful in scenarios where you have a large number of similar objects that can share intrinsic data, such as character objects in a word processor or tree nodes in a large graphical scene. 26. How does the decorator pattern differ from the proxy pattern? Answer. The decorator pattern adds behavior to objects dynamically, while the proxy pattern controls access to an object without altering its behavior. Decorator is often used to extend functionality at runtime, whereas proxy is used for purposes like lazy loading, access control, or logging. 27. How would you apply the template method pattern in a project where multiple steps of a process are shared but some vary? Answer. In the template method pattern, the shared steps are implemented in a base class method, while the steps that vary are defined in abstract methods for subclasses to implement. For example, in a meal preparation system, the base class could define the general process, prepare ingredients, cook, serve, while subclasses implement specifics, e.g., different cooking techniques. 28. When would you use the bridge pattern over the adapter pattern? Answer. The bridge pattern is used when you want to decouple an abstraction from its implementation, allowing both to vary independently. The adapter pattern, however, is used to make two incompatible interfaces work together. Use bridge when you need to extend both abstraction and implementation hierarchies independently, and adapter when you just need to connect two existing interfaces. 29. Explain a scenario where the command pattern would be useful in implementing user interactions. Answer. The command pattern is useful in a system where users can perform and undo actions, such as a text editor. Each action, like cut, copy, and paste, can be encapsulated in a command object, making it easy to execute and undo these actions independently without coupling the user interface to the action's implementation. 30. How would you use the composite pattern to represent a tree structure, such as a file system? Answer. The composite pattern allows you to build a tree structure where individual objects and their compositions are treated uniformly. For a file system, files and directories can both be treated as nodes, with files being leaf nodes and directories being composite nodes that can contain other files or directories. 31. What is the benefit of using the abstract factory pattern in large systems? Answer. The abstract factory pattern provides an interface to create families of related objects without specifying their concrete classes, promoting consistency across products. This is beneficial in large systems where different subsystems need to work with a consistent set of related objects, such as creating UI elements for different platforms, e.g., Windows, Mac OS. 32. In what scenario would you apply the proxy pattern to manage expensive resources? Answer. The proxy pattern can be used when you need to control access to expensive resources like remote objects, large files, or database connections. For example, in a web service, a proxy can cache frequently requested data to reduce the need for repeated calls to the remote server, improving performance. 33. How does the strategy pattern allow for dynamic selection of algorithms at runtime? Answer. The strategy pattern encapsulates different algorithms in separate classes and allows a client to choose which one to use at runtime. For instance, in a sorting system, you can define different sorting strategies, e.g., quicksort, merge sort, and let the user select the desired strategy based on the dataset size. 34. When would you use the visitor pattern in a system where objects need multiple, unrelated operations? Answer. The visitor pattern is useful when you need to perform multiple, unrelated operations on objects without modifying their classes. For example, in an accounting system, You might have a visitor that calculates taxes and another that generates reports, both operating on the same set of financial transactions. 35. Explain how the iterator pattern simplifies traversing a collection of objects. Answer. The iterator pattern provides a way to access elements of a collection sequentially without exposing its underlying representation. It simplifies traversal by separating the logic of how the collection is structured from how it's iterated over, allowing the same interface to work with different types of collections, e.g., lists, trees. 36. How does the state pattern differ from the strategy pattern in terms of intent? Answer. The state pattern focuses on changing an object's behavior based on its internal state, where each state represents a different behavior. The strategy pattern, however, focuses on selecting different algorithms dynamically. While both patterns allow for behavior changes, state is concerned with the object's own state, whereas strategy deals with interchangeable external algorithms. 37. In what situations would you prefer the mediator pattern over direct communication between objects? Answer. The mediator pattern is preferred when multiple objects need to communicate, but direct communication would lead to tight coupling. By centralizing the communication in a mediator, you can reduce dependencies between objects, making the system easier to maintain. For example, in a chatroom application, a mediator can manage the communication between participants. 38. Can you explain the significance of using the factory method pattern in frameworks? Answer. The factory method pattern allows frameworks to delegate the instantiation of objects to client code. This is significant because it provides flexibility in deciding which class to instantiate, enabling the framework to remain extensible without being tightly coupled to specific classes. It's commonly used in plugin architectures. 39. How would you use the builder pattern to construct a complex object with optional parts? Answer. The builder pattern allows you to construct a complex object step by step, specifying only the parts that are necessary. For example, when building a car, the builder can add optional features like sunroofs or sound systems without requiring the client to pass all parameters at once. This makes object creation more flexible and readable. 40. How does the proxy pattern help with security in a system? Answer. The proxy pattern can be used to control access to sensitive objects by wrapping the object in a proxy that checks permissions before allowing access. This is useful in systems where users have different access levels, as the proxy can ensure that only authorized users can interact with certain resources or perform specific actions. 41. When would you choose the decorator pattern over inheritance to extend functionality? Answer. The decorator pattern is preferred when you want to add functionality dynamically and avoid the complexities of inheritance. With inheritance, extending functionality requires creating new subclasses for every combination of behaviors. Decorator allows for flexible composition, where behaviors can be added or removed at runtime without changing the object's class. 42. Explain a scenario where the chain of responsibility pattern can improve the maintainability of request handling logic. Answer. The chain of responsibility pattern allows you to decouple request handling by passing requests through a chain of handlers. This improves maintainability in scenarios like a logging system, where different log levels, e.g., info, warning, error, are handled by different components, and you want to add or remove handlers without altering existing code. 43. What is the main difference between the template method and strategy patterns? Answer. The template method pattern defines the overall structure of an algorithm, allowing subclasses to implement specific steps. The strategy pattern, on the other hand, allows you to switch out the entire algorithm dynamically. Template method is used when the structure is fixed but details vary, whereas strategy is used when the algorithm itself can change. 44. How does the visitor pattern allow for adding operations without modifying object classes? Answer. The visitor pattern allows you to add new operations to an object structure without modifying the object classes by defining a visitor class that implements the operation. The object structure accepts the visitor, which performs the operation. This is particularly useful in systems where adding new operations to many classes would otherwise require changing each class. 45. When would you prefer using the abstract factory pattern in a cross-platform application? Answer: the abstract factory pattern is useful in cross-platform applications when you need to create families of related objects that differ between platforms. For example, a GUI library might provide different implementations for Windows, macOS, and Linux, while using the same interface to create window, button, and menu objects appropriate for each platform. 46. How would you apply the command pattern to implement a macro feature in an application? Answer: the command pattern encapsulates actions as objects, allowing you to queue and execute them sequentially. To implement a macro feature, each user action, e.g., typing, formatting, can be represented as a command, and the commands can be recorded and played back in sequence to repeat the same set of operations. 47. Explain how the flyweight pattern can optimize the performance of a graphical application. Answer: in a graphical application, the flyweight pattern can optimize performance by sharing the intrinsic state of graphical objects that are repeated many times, such as tree nodes or game sprites. By only storing unique elements and sharing the rest, the application can reduce memory usage and improve rendering speed. 48. How does the composite pattern simplify operations on hierarchical structures like organizational charts? Answer: the composite pattern allows individual objects and compositions of objects to be treated uniformly. In an organizational chart, employees can be either leaf nodes, individual employees, or composite nodes, departments, and operations like display details can be applied to both individuals and entire departments without special handling. 49. What problem does the proxy pattern solve in the context of remote method invocation, RMI? Answer: in the context of RMI, the proxy pattern provides a local proxy for a remote object, handling communication details like network latency, serialization, and method invocation. This allows clients to interact with the remote object as if it were local, without needing to manage the complexities of remote communication. 50. Can you explain how the strategy pattern promotes the open/closed principle? Answer: the strategy pattern promotes the open/closed principle by allowing new algorithms to be added without modifying existing code. Instead of changing the code to accommodate a new algorithm, you can create a new strategy class that implements the required algorithm, keeping existing code open for extension but closed for modification. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Visit parthakachana.com for technology resources and stock analysis.